Are the mighty Rajapaksas finally falling? The pressure has got to them. The brothers are divided. We told you about the rift yesterday. Now we can tell you that the Prime Minister may be sacked. President Gotabaya Rajapaksa is facing calls for resignation, and to save his chair, he may sacrifice his brother, Mahinda Rajapaksa, who is currently the Prime Minister. He may be sacked. But Mahinda is no greenhorn. He's Gota's political guru, and he is plotting to curb his powers, with a constitutional amendment, no less. Now, this looks like a full-blown battle between the Rajapaksas. Where does this leave the people of Sri Lanka? Caught in the crossfire as the power struggle rages on, with no sign of respite from the current financial crisis. On Gravitas tonight, we'll bring you the latest from Colombo, the all-new Game of Thrones. Politics is like a jungle. Power dictates the rules, survival of the fittest, they say, and there's a price for this survival. In Sri Lanka, the president looks ready to pay that price. We are talking about Gotabaya Rajapaksa. He was brought into politics by his elder brother, Mahinda Rajapaksa. Earlier, Mahinda was president. Now he's the prime minister. But he may have to leave. He may be sacked by his own younger brother, Gotabaya. And that's the price I'm talking about, the price for Gotabaya's survival in the presidential office. We got a news flash today. It said Mahinda Rajapaksa will be asked to go. Sri Lanka will have a new prime minister and a new government, an interim government. It's something that has been in the news for a while, also something that has not been officially confirmed, I must note. Tonight on Gravitas, we'll discuss what's buzzing in the power corridors of Colombo. Are the brothers splitting? Is this the end of the Rajapaksa dynasty? And more importantly, will this political churn, what will it mean for Sri Lanka's future? Let's start with today's big headline, the talk of Mahinda Rajapaksa's resignation/dismissal. Is he stepping down? Well, he has not been asked yet. But former president of Sri Lanka, Maithripala Sirisena, says it is going to happen and that the president has agreed to this. But President Gotabaya Rajapaksa's office is now denying all these reports. There was an all-party meeting in Colombo today. It was called by the president. A total of 11 political parties were in attendance. This includes members of the ruling party and the opposition. Why was the meeting called? Because Gotabaya Rajapaksa has been trying to stitch a unity government. Today was his second attempt, and it seems to have worked.
Following a meeting between government political party leaders as well as President Gotabaya Rajapaksa this morning, according to the chairman of the Sri Lanka Freedom Party, that is also former President Maithripala Sirisena, President Gotabaya Rajapaksa has in fact agreed to form an interim party government, while adding Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa as well as the newly appointed cabinet will promptly be removed before forming this interim party government. Now, this is a big development, provided that over the past few days, Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa has been assertive in his decision to make sure that he is understood by everyone to not resign here in the country.
How will this unity government function? Some proposals are being considered. One of the ideas is to create a national council. It will have members of all political parties. The national council will replace the cabinet. It will be empowered to take all decisions. Who will lead this national council? Will it be Mahinda Rajapaksa? The big brother is rejecting the president's plans. He won't back a unity government and he refuses to step down. I have some of his recent statements with me. Allow me to quote. What use of interim governments when people with varying policies can't see eye to eye? Well, he's got a point. There has to be accord, which is not possible. If there is a need for an interim government, it should happen only under my leadership. What about the massive protests in Sri Lanka? The growing calls for his resignation. Well, this is what Mahinda Rajapaksa had to say about that. And I'm quoting again. This is not the first time, though. There have been protests earlier against me as well. People have the right to voice against me, but when an election approaches, the people will vote for us because we have delivered over the years. Once again, the brothers are at odds. Yesterday, we told you how the Rajapaksas are divided. They could not agree on a cabinet. Mahinda Rajapaksa wanted experience. Gotabaya overruled him. He inducted younger faces. The president has not asked the prime minister to quit yet. but he is under intense pressure to do so, and the Constitution of Sri Lanka allows him to do so, to dismiss the Prime Minister. In fact, it was Mahinda Rajapaksa who gave this power to his brother. He pushed that bill himself in 2020. Now the same brother could fire him. So what are the Prime Minister's options? Mahinda Rajapaksa is planning a constitutional amendment. An amendment to abolish the executive presidency, meaning it will take away the sweeping powers of the president. A subcommittee has been set up to plan this amendment, but does Mahinda Rajapaksa have the time to push this constitutional amendment? The clock is ticking. Anti-government protests are getting bigger in Sri Lanka. People have been on the streets for over a month now, and trade unions have joined them. They've given 7 days to the government, and they threaten to shut down Sri Lanka again if their demands are not met. Yesterday, nearly 1,000 trade unions staged a strike. The entire country came to a standstill. It could happen again. The Rajapaksas have lost support of the powerful Buddhist monks too. Even they want the brothers to go. A senior monk issued a statement. He said Sri Lanka has become a failed state. His words, failed state. And this is the biggest of all setbacks, this loss of support from the Buddhist clergy. The Rajapaksas are cornered and isolated, and now they're also divided, fighting each other. Both the president and the prime minister are trying to hold on to power. We're waiting to see which brother wins. But we can safely say that Sri Lankans will be the losers, because this has become a battle for power now, not one to rescue Sri Lanka from the acute crisis it's in. And speaking of losers, let's head to Pakistan. Their political drama has gone global. The Prime Minister has taken it with him all the way to Saudi Arabia, in Medina to be precise. It's the second holiest city in Islam, the cradle of Islamic culture. Pakistani politics seems to have violated the city's sanctity. I'll tell you why. First, the background. We've been telling you Shehbaz Sharif, the new Prime Minister of Pakistan, is visiting Saudi Arabia. He landed there last night. He headed straight to Medina, and he went there to perform the Umrah. He did not go to Medina alone. He took along some of his aides, like Information Minister Maryam Aurangzeb and the Minister of Narcotics Shahzain Bukti. Little did the two know what was in store for them. Let me show you these images from Masjid-e-Nabawi in Medina, the burial place of Prophet Muhammad. Sharif's delegation got quite the welcome here. This is how they were greeted.
People are saying, "Jor to Shehbaz Sharif's government."
Chor, they said, thieves and traitors, that's what they called them. The heckling went on for several minutes, and with each passing minute, the pilgrims got more creative. Watch this now.
भाई इस लोटे को क्यों लेके जा रहे हो? इस लोटे को क्यों लेके जा रहे हो? क्या देख रहा है? हम अपना पैसा लगा क्या है इधर? बगैरत पैसा लगा क्या है? क्या देख रहा है? नहीं क्या देख रहा है? नहीं क्या देख रहा है?
So who were these people? They claim to be pilgrims. The Information Minister of Pakistan disagrees. She says that these people were planted there. By whom? Without taking names, she hinted that they were sent by Imran Khan, a man she says has destroyed Pakistan's society. Listen to this.
जो ये माशरे की तबाही है, जो मैं उस शख्स का नाम इस पाक ज़मीन पे नहीं लूंगी क्योंकि मैं इस ज़मीन को सियासत के लिए इस्तेमाल नहीं करना चाहती, लेकिन उन्होंने जो इस माशरे में तबाही की है, जो ये आज इस तरह की बदतमीजी और रवैये, लेकिन बहुत सा ऐसा माशरे का हिस्सा और तबका मौजूद है और इससे ज़्यादा है जो कि अभी भी इन तमाम रवायात, जो हमारा कल्चर है, हमारी रवायात हैं, उनकी अहमियत को जानता है। लेकिन ये जो चीज़ है, ये वक्त लगेगा, लेकिन इंशाअल्लाह ये भी इसी हमारे मस्बत रवैयों से ठीक होगा।
We cannot verify if the hecklers were indeed from the PTI, but we have a video from the mosque. In this video is Sheikh Rashid Shafiq. a member of Imran Khan's party, also the nephew of Sheikh Rashid Ahmad, Pakistan's former interior minister. In this video, Mr. Shafiq gives a detailed account of what happened. The Shehbaz Sharif government says this video proves that PTI leaders orchestrated the entire thing. Well, they might have. What is the PMLN doing about it? They're thrashing PTI members back in Islamabad. Look at this video now. It shows Qasim Khan Suri, the former Deputy Speaker of Pakistan, being attacked at a restaurant.
PTI Murdabad! PTI Murdabad!
आज अभी होटल में बैठा हुआ था और सहरी के लिए अचानक जो है कुछ लोग आए हैं और बुज़दिल लोग, और आते साथ उन्होंने जो है अटैक कर दिया। टेबल पे साथ जो है लोग बैठे हुए थे, ख्वातीन भी बैठी हुई थी, और आप यकीन करें कि जिस तरीके से लोगों ने एकदम रिस्पॉन्ड दिया है और लोगों ने उनको उल्टा गालियां देनी शुरू की हैं और उनकी जो बदतमीजी उन्होंने आके की है, लोगों ने कुर्सियां तक उनको मारी हैं, वेटर्स ने जो है वो उनको मारना शुरू किया है। और ये कुत्ते जो आए थे ये टाइगर के शिकार नहीं कर सकते। कुत्ते जो है वापस जलील होके गए हैं।
You heard that. Dogs cannot hunt tigers. Now, given this chaos, it's tough to tell who's who, in fact. Dogs and tigers, I mean. Shehbaz Sharif may be in power, but he is not being treated as such. In Medina, his ministers were being heckled. In Islamabad, thousands are rallying against him. In Lahore, he faces a court case over a sugar scam. Same story with Imran Khan. He has been dethroned. The army is against him. The authorities are after him. Reports say Imran Khan could soon be tried for high treason. On what grounds? For scuttling the no-confidence vote, for pushing the foreign conspiracy theory. The federal government, the Federal Investigation Agency and the Election Commission of Pakistan, they're all trying to build a case against him. So both the former Prime Minister and the current Prime Minister are on tricky terrain. What about the people of Pakistan? Where does this leave them? With more unrest, more political instability, and more economic suffering. A few days back, Dawn filed this report. It said the ongoing political slugfest has polarized the society to extremes. Political divisions have seeped into all segments of public life in Pakistan. Even the slightest of political debates turn into physical brawls. Even children are developing friendships based on political affiliations. The situation is no less than a civil war. This is from a Pakistani newspaper. Their story in their words. Well, let's turn to the so-called first world, making news for the third-class conduct of its leaders. Westminster is being called Pestminster. That's because it reportedly houses sexual predators. And the revelations could not have come at a worse time. First, the party gate, now a wave of sexual misconduct allegations. 4 in recent weeks, each more shocking than the previous one. It began with this piece, a sexist and misogynistic piece about the deputy leader of the Labour Party. Her name is Angela Rayner. She was accused of deploying basic instinct tactics against Boris Johnson. What does that even mean? Well, this is a reference to a scene from the movie Basic Instinct, the most famous scene with Sharon Stone. You may recall the scene. So this claim of Boris Johnson being targeted with basic instinct tactics was made by a conservative lawmaker anonymously. It was then published. And I wouldn't even call this an allegation. This is a slur. And it has led to skeletons tumbling out of the cupboard. Look at the headlines that have appeared since. 56 MPs face sexual misconduct claims. Let me repeat that. 56 MPs in the UK face sexual misconduct claims. 3 cabinet ministers are on the list. And these leaders come from both parties, the Conservatives and the Labour Party. In all, there are 70 complaints, 70. So some of the lawmakers could be repeat offenders. Who are these MPs? Well, we can't say because their identities remain a secret. The allegations are shocking nonetheless. At least one of the complaints involves criminality. One of the MPs is believed to have bribed a staffer. He wanted sexual favours in return. The ruling Conservatives are dealing with their own set of complaints. One of them was about this man, Imran Ahmad Khan. He was recently expelled by the Conservatives because he was found guilty of sexually assaulting a minor. And these, remember, are lawmakers in Britain. Sleazy behaviour in the House of Commons is apparently a regular affair. A Tory MP has been accused of watching porn in the chamber. He's believed to be a frontbencher, and he did this while sitting next to a female lawmaker. How does the ruling party justify such behaviour? Prime Minister Boris Johnson is buying time, promising a probe.
Well, I think it's obviously unacceptable for anybody to be doing that kind of thing in the workplace. It would be the same for any kind of job up and down the country. Let's be absolutely clear about that. What needs to happen now is that the proper procedures need to be gone through. The independent complaints and grievances procedure needs to be activated, and we need to get to understand the facts. But yeah, I mean, this is clearly, that kind of behaviour is clearly totally unacceptable.
Boris Johnson looked surprised, but there's nothing new or surprising about these transgressions. According to several lawmakers, it's part of the culture at Westminster. British Defence Secretary Ben Wallace says this has been going on for decades. I had that statement with me. Let me read out for you what he said. Hundreds and hundreds of people working long hours in a place with bars, and for some people under lots of pressure for all sorts of reasons. That's been going on for decades. So it has been going on for decades, years. The British Parliament has refused to act against such lawmakers. So when there are no consequences, when there's no punishment, the predators get away with practically everything. Female lawmakers are now publicly calling out their male colleagues. One of them is Anne-Marie Trevelyan. She is the International Trade Secretary, and this is what she said, I'm quoting again, fundamentally, listen to this, fundamentally, if you're a bloke, keep your hands in your pockets and behave as you would if you had your daughter in the room. Women are telling male MPs to keep their hands in their pockets. That's how bad things are. Westminster is unsafe for women, and I'm not the one saying this. This is what a House of Commons investigation concluded. A report came out in 2019, that's 3 years ago. It said staffers faced an unacceptable risk of being mistreated. By whom? By the lawmakers. And this inquiry received several complaints. Many female staffers faced unwelcome advances. Some MPs even tried to forcibly kiss them. This has become a pattern. Every year there are complaints, there are promises of action, but nothing changes. What happens when someone is found guilty? At best, they exit public life, only for the seats to be filled by another set of predators, evidently. The British Parliament has become a house of shame and scandals, and they can only clean it up in one way. They must name, shame, and punish these lawmakers. And that's not the end of troubles for the Prime Minister of Britain. Boris Johnson seems to have become a magnet for controversy. And now there's a row that he faces over his visit to India. He inaugurated a JCB factory in India, and he's now being criticized for it. JCB equipment, in fact, is being criticized, accused of enabling human rights violations. The company is a major donor to the Conservative Party. Our next report tells you more.
Do this!
Boris Johnson likes powerful vehicles, particularly the JCB. One of them is believed to have got him elected. This powerful photo op propelled his fortunes in the 2019 election. But Boris Johnson's next appearance with the JCB was a disaster. The British Prime Minister was in Gujarat. He proudly inaugurated a JCB factory. Once again, he posed with the machines.
Here on Thursday I visited JCB, British-owned, but made in India, exporting 60,000 around the world, by the way, 110 countries.
He made it to the front pages in India and the UK, and it all went south from there. The British papers ran scathing headlines. One of them said that the photo op is being criticized in London. Another claimed the visit has caused outrage. What was the reason behind the anger? It's the controversial nature of the JCB itself. When Boris Johnson was in India, local authorities in New Delhi carried out a demolition drive. It happened in the Jahangir-Puri area of India's capital city. Critics said the demolition was targeted at the Muslim community. India's Supreme Court halted the drive. Johnson's rivals continue to raise the issue. They have accused the Prime Minister of being tone-deaf. The photo op was raised in the UK Parliament too. What explains these relentless attacks? JCB is one of the leading donors to the Conservatives in Britain. Since 2001, the company has given over $17 million to the party. It has been a fruitful association for the Conservatives, but controversies around JCB are casting a shadow on the relationship. Reports say the company's equipment has been used to carry out human rights violations in Israel. It has been used to destroy Palestinian homes, agricultural land, and other properties in Palestinian territory. The United Nations Office of Human Rights has taken note of this. The JCB was designed to build things. Now it has become a symbol of polarizing politics, for no fault of the machine.
On Wednesday, we told you about the energy war in Europe. We told you how Europe had two choices: A, give in to Russia, or B, take the bitter pill and ration power. It seems Europe has chosen option A. They're giving in to Vladimir Putin's demands. Now, what exactly was Putin asking for? Rubles. Putin said, if you want Russian gas, pay in our currency. No more euros, no more dollars. You must pay in the Russian ruble. The idea was to bolster the currency, to keep it competitive. At first, Europe aggressively pushed back. They called it blackmail. Here's what German Chancellor Olaf Scholz said back in March.
We have looked at the contracts for gas supplies and other supplies. It says that payment is made in euros, sometimes dollars, but usually in euros. And I made it clear in the conversation with the Russian president that that will remain the case.
No confusion there. Payments will continue to be made in euros. That's what the Chancellor said. 28 days later, things have changed. German energy giants are planning to follow Putin's decree. The biggest player is Uniper. Here's what the company is saying. We consider a payment conversion compliant with sanctions law and the Russian decree to be possible. For our company and for Germany as a whole, it is not possible to do without Russian gas in the short term. And Uniper is just one company. Reports say many more are lining up to do the same. Austrian company OMV, Italy's Eni, all of them are planning to comply with Putin's demand. Reports say 10 companies have opened accounts at the Gazprom Bank. 4 of them have started payments. What is the European Union saying about all of this? Buying gas is one thing. Buying gas on Putin's terms is another. The EU continues to emphasize on one thing: you cannot pay in rubles. Well, if that's the case, what will happen to all of these companies, Uniper, OMV, Eni, and all the others? Technically, the EU will have to take action against them. But so far, Brussels has been silent, and there's a reason for that. A convenient loophole in their sanctions. Let me explain how this works. A few days back, the European Commission published a guidance for companies, sort of like a cheat book. And this guidance had 3 objectives. 1, uphold EU sanctions. 2, abide by Putin's decree. And 3, secure natural gas for Europe. Basically, it was a win-win for both sides. And here's how it works. European companies must open 2 accounts at the Gazprom Bank. 1 ruble account and 1 euro account. The payments would still be made in euros, but Gazprom Bank will convert those euros into rubles. In other words, the company pays in euros, but Russia gets the money in rubles. And I know what you're thinking. Surely sanctions are not that easy to sidestep. You're right, they're not. Because to convert the currency, you need Russia's central bank. The problem is, Europe has sanctioned Russia's central bank. Any business with them is banned. So Brussels has come up with another idea to sidestep their own sanctions, sort of like a technicality. Normally, a payment is confirmed after the currency has been converted. In this case, only after the euros become rubles. The EU says, don't wait for that. Pay in euros, get your payment confirmed. What happens next is none of your concern. Ingenious, right? Also morally bankrupt. This is nothing more than a loophole. because Russia is still getting paid in rubles. The companies are still following Putin's decree. In effect, this is a violation of sanctions. But Europe does not care. Without Russian gas, their people will suffer. It's a choice between air conditioning and peace. And Germany has clearly chosen air conditioning. A few others are delaying the inevitable, like Italy. Their government has unveiled a new strategy, Operation Thermostat. Italians will have to ration their ACs. Not less than 25 degrees in the summer and not more than 19 degrees in the winter. Schools and public buildings will have to comply. This scheme will run from 2022 May to April 2023, so 1 year. And I know it sounds like some big sacrifice, but consider this. All these sanctions, all this power rationing, the end goal is to stop Russia's war. At the same time, Europe is paying 200 to 800 million euros every day to Russia. In other words, they're funding Putin's war machine. Since the invasion, 70% of Russia's fossil fuels have ended up in Europe. So all this talk of countering Putin is hypocrisy. Imagine Britain buying gas from Nazi Germany during the Second World War, or France, or America. You cannot bankroll and criticize the same war. But that's exactly what Europe is doing. German companies pay millions of euros to Russia. Russia uses that money to wage war. That same Germany will also send tanks and missiles to Ukraine, and those tanks will destroy Russian weapons. Moral of the story, all the lectures on principles are a farce. What matters in the end is your own interests. And some countries take that idea too far. That pursuit of power makes them oblivious to gross injustices. One such country is China. They have struck a major deal in Afghanistan. The Taliban have approved a Chinese industrial park project in Kabul. It will be built, owned and operated by a company called Chinatown. This proposal was made 3 years back. The civilian government did not approve it, but the Taliban readily agreed. The groundbreaking ceremony was held on Thursday. Now, what exactly will this park project achieve? The details are still sketchy. But here's what a Global Times report says. The project will enable business cooperation in areas ranging from mining development to urban area construction and production of building materials. In other words, this project could be a bridge between China and Afghanistan. A bridge for what? More infrastructure projects, more strategic agreements, more economic cooperation. The Chinese know exactly what they want: Afghanistan's natural resources. Let me go back to that Global Times report. Since the Taliban government came to power, interest in Afghanistan's mining sector has been growing among Chinese firms, including projects involving copper and lithium, given the massive deposits in the country that are estimated to be worth as much as $1 trillion. For China, Afghanistan is a major asset. And we can think of 4 reasons why. Number 1, plenty of resources to plunder. Number 2, Afghanistan's location. To the south is China's biggest colony, Pakistan. To the north is Central Asia. So Afghanistan has the potential to become a transit hub. And China is thinking along those lines. Last month, their Foreign Minister Wang Yi visited Kabul. He said China would be willing to extend CPEC into Afghanistan, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, CPEC. Basically bind Pakistan and Afghanistan with their infrastructure. Reason number 3, it would complete an axis against India, Pakistan, Afghanistan and China. That would cover the entire northern frontier of India. And number 4, a desperate regime in Afghanistan. The Taliban need money. They need diplomatic recognition to survive. And China is their best bet for both. That gives Beijing plenty of leverage in Kabul. Just last month, they hosted a summit for Afghanistan. Delegates from all over the world, Indonesia, Qatar, Central Asia, Russia, United States, all of them attended these talks. Also present was the Taliban's foreign minister. So China has placed a bet on the Taliban regime. And frankly, only they can. Because look at the Taliban's rule. No school for girls, no jobs for women, no safety for minorities. How can any responsible country bet on such a regime? China, though, has no problems. Having said that, they're not going all in. It's more of a conservative bet. And I'll tell you why. The Taliban may have won the civil war, but Afghanistan is not at peace. Even today, there were 2 explosions in the city of Mazar-e-Sharif. At least 9 people were killed and 13 were injured. The target was Afghanistan's Hazara community. The attackers were the Islamic State of Khorasan province, ISKP. The same group that the Taliban claims to have vanquished. Well, clearly not. Last week, there were 3 separate attacks. 2 mosques and 1 school was targeted. Put together, 56 people lost their lives. This is why China is reluctant. Right now, 5 Chinese firms have mining operations in Afghanistan. 20 more are apparently interested. The question is, will these Chinese investments be safe? Chances are they won't. The Taliban may not care about the Uyghur Muslims in Xinjiang, but guess who does? The Islamic State of Khorasan province. Ironic but true. Reports say the ISKP is looking to recruit Afghan Uyghurs. And if true, that makes any Chinese asset a target. And you know what happens next? What happened to the Soviet Union in the 1980s? What happened to the United States in the last 2 decades? You get bogged down in Afghanistan's infighting. China will look to avoid that. So right now, their strategy is twofold. 1, cultivate the Taliban regime, send them aid, give them some kind of legitimacy, basically keep them on the hook. And 2, test the ground situation for investments. This Spark project in Kabul could be a step in that direction. From Afghanistan, we're shifting west to Iran. It's in the headlines again, not for its nuclear program for a change, but something as controversial. Capital punishment. A new report says Iran executed more than 300 people in the last year, 300 people in 2021, 300 death penalties in a year. What were they for? The crimes are debatable. Some were executed for blasphemy, some over drug consumption, some for their sexual orientation. Here's a report on the execution capital of the world.
The Islamic Republic of Iran has long been and remains a leading executioner. It executes more people per capita than any other country. Child offenders, religious dissidents, drug consumers, homosexuals. If caught and found guilty, they all meet the same fate. They are all put to death. In 2018, Iran carried out 253 executions. In 2019, it executed 225 people. In 2020, 267 people were executed. And last year, the figure jumped to an all-time high. At least 333 people were put to death. This marks a 25% surge in executions. And it coincides with the rise of Ebrahim Raisi, a hardline cleric who was elected president last year. The Norway-based Iran human rights body says Raisi's stringent policies are driving more executions, especially for drug-related offences. Out of the 333 executions, at least 126 were over drug-related charges. Only 55 executions were officially announced. The remaining 278 were carried out discreetly. 2 of those executed were juvenile offenders, and 17 of them were women. Among the women executed were Zahra Esmaili and Mariam Karimi. Their crime was murdering their abusive husbands. The report says Zahra died of a heart attack prior to execution. The report also expresses alarm over the executions of ethnic minorities, especially the Balochis. They accounted for 21% of those executed, although they represent only 2 to 6% of Iran's population. If we speak of child offenders, only 2 were executed last year, but there are 85 juveniles currently on death row, many of them for crimes they did not commit. The report says these figures are just the tip of the iceberg. The actual number of executions is likely higher, but given the state's secrecy over capital punishment, the world may never really know the full scale of executions. There is also very little they can do about it. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Harry Truman had a famous one-liner for his rivals. If you can't convince them, confuse them. China seems to agree. They have been desperately trying to win allies, loans, weapons, investments. They've tried everything, but no luck. So now Xi Jinping is going the Truman way, confusing the world. Last week he announced a new project, the Global Security Initiative. A lot of diplomats are trying to make sense of what that means, because Xi Jinping's speech was no help. A lot of Chinese idioms, vague comparisons, and the usual peppering of words like hegemony and power politics. There was no clarity on the details. Later on, his foreign minister had to explain, and here's what he said. The initiative contributes Chinese wisdom to make up for the present peace deficit. We firmly oppose the use of the Indo-Pacific strategy to divide the region and create a new Cold War, and the use of military alliances to put together an Asian version of NATO. That makes it quite clear. The world is suffering from a peace deficit, he says, but don't worry, because good old communist wisdom will help all of us. There is nothing global or secure about this global security initiative. It's about challenging the Quad, about establishing Chinese dominance in the Indo-Pacific. But as usual, Beijing hides its real intentions with vague definitions. This one is no different. It has 6 commitments. 1, a vision of common, comprehensive, cooperative and sustainable security. 2, respecting the sovereignty and territorial integrity of these countries, of all countries, and this is China speaking. 3, abiding by the purposes and principles of the UN Charter. 4, taking the legitimate security concerns of all countries seriously. 5, resolving differences and disputes between countries through dialogue. Let me remind you, this is China. And 6, work together on terrorism, climate change, cybersecurity and biosecurity. Sounds perfect, doesn't it? Nothing you could possibly disagree on. Well, that's precisely the point. China's proposal is so broad and so vague that no country can oppose it. But their actions do not match those proposals. Cooperation, sovereignty, dialogue, these are not exactly China's strengths. So what are they hoping to achieve with this project? Well, here's what Wang Yi said. This initiative would build an Asian security model of mutual respect, openness and integration. He says Asian model, which means the Chinese model. That's what he means. The fact is, Beijing is spooked. They thought Russia's war would give them some breathing space, perhaps a window to try something adventurous, but that did not happen. Take a look at what's happening in the Solomon Islands. China signed a security pact there. America threatened military action. And that's not all. The Quad nations have refused to let Ukraine distract them. In fact, they could meet next month. US President Joe Biden is visiting Japan and South Korea from the 20th of May. Tokyo wants to organize a Quad summit. Chances are India will agree, but Australia may not. May 21st is election day in Australia. Prime Minister Scott Morrison is not guaranteed a re-election. In fact, his party is trailing in the polls. Either way, a second in-person summit is on the cards, and China is worried. Their foreign ministry has slammed the Quad as part of outdated Cold War mentality.
The quadrilateral mechanism you mentioned is full of outdated Cold War mentality and zero-sum thinking, and has overtones of military confrontation. It is against the trend of the times and is doomed to be unpopular.
Same broken record. China is doing exactly what they're accusing the Quad of: power politics and military confrontation. So far, it has not worked. More countries are joining the alliance of democracies. Reports say South Korea could join the Quad. They want to, at least. So China's new strategy is creating a so-called Asian order. Japan claimed it was doing something similar before the Second World War, leading and liberating Asia. And we all know how that turned out. Asian countries must not fall for this ruse, because this rivalry is not about blocs or spheres of influence. It's about ideology. Does Asia want democracy or autocracy? That is the question. And we'll wrap this week with a story on Mark Zuckerberg. Well, you all know him. Zuckerberg is the CEO of Facebook and its parent company Meta. He was once the world's third richest man. He has now slipped to the 12th position, from the 3rd to the 12th. Zuckerberg was once the face of social media revolution. Today he has become the face of big tech's tyranny. You could say Zuck has run out of luck. This is a story about Zuckerberg's rise and decline. In July 2021, Mark Zuckerberg was touted to become the world's richest man. He was sitting on $142 billion, just third in the line to the top. But the fortune wheel turned against Zuckerberg. He lost 50% of his wealth in less than 9 months. 50%. Was it because of something he did? Or was it because of Facebook's policy? Or a combination of both? In 2010, a blockbuster biopic made Mark Zuckerberg a sensation. He was an outlier Harvard dropout. He had stolen intellectual property and compensated for it by giving the world Facebook, a medium that connected people from across the world, that helped people reconnect with childhood friends, helped them find love, find opportunities, a medium that even helped small businesses. Facebook was an instant hit, and Zuckerberg became an icon instantly. The youth that moved to Facebook from Orkut and High Five began idolizing Zuckerberg. Aspiring entrepreneurs began aping him. They were wearing the same color T-shirt every day to save time, just like Zuckerberg. Mark Zuckerberg was a walking, talking self-help book. He personified success. He was young. He had married a college sweetheart. Together, Zuckerberg and Priscilla Chan were America's most generous donors. She was a pediatrician, and Zuckerberg the face of the social media revolution. Until he became the face of big tech tyranny.
But it's clear now that we didn't do enough to prevent these tools from being used for harm as well. And that goes for fake news, for foreign interference in elections and hate speech, as well as developers and data privacy. We didn't take a broad enough view of our responsibility, and that was a big mistake. And it was my mistake, and I'm sorry. I started Facebook, I run it, and I'm responsible for what happens here.
Over the years, Facebook developed a dark side. It began sharing user data illegally, fighting with countries over user privacy. It began killing competition, acquiring popular apps like Instagram and WhatsApp. At one point, Facebook was live streaming terror, silencing free speech and peddling hate for profit. So stakeholders began unfriending Facebook. The year 2020 was the first time Facebook saw an exodus of major advertisers. More than 500 companies boycotted the platform. They demanded that Facebook do more to address racism and hate speech. As we speak, Facebook's ad income has plunged once again. There's a war in Ukraine, there is global inflation, and companies are not willing to splurge on online ads. Facebook, which relies on ads for 97% of its revenue, is taking the hit. The result is this. Zuckerberg's accounts are bleeding. But ads are just one part of the story. Mark Zuckerberg holds around 16% of Meta shares. His image and fortune are dependent on Facebook. The social media platform made him a household name. Facebook's popularity built Zuckerberg's fortune. It paid for his $7 million California estate, his $100 million Hawaii property, $150 million luxury yacht, swanky private jet rides, and his collection of custom-made Brunello Cucinelli grey shirts, each costing about $400. In December 2021, Meta reported a decline in profit. Its forecast for the first quarter of 2022 was lower than expected. Shareholders began panic selling. Facebook lost $300 billion in investor wealth in a day. And this was on the third day of February of 2022. By then, Facebook had already lost users. The platform closed 2021 with less than 2 billion active users, as against 1.93 billion earlier. For a business that uses users as products, even one less login reflects strongly on the logbook. Today, a lot of these users have begun spending more time on other apps like Instagram. But in this in-house migration, it does not matter to Meta. What ticks it off is TikTok. The app's user base has exploded over the years. TikTok registered its billionth user in 2021. That's just after 4 years after its global launch. It had taken Facebook and Instagram double the time. WhatsApp had taken 7 years to land its billionth user. Facebook is seeing its biggest decline among users aged 18 to 25. The same age group had flocked to Facebook in the early 2000s. Youngsters had taught their parents and grandparents how to create Facebook accounts and profiles, how to add friends. But today's youth finds Facebook boring. They've moved to quote-unquote cooler apps. If you look closely, This story, the story of Zuckerberg's rise and decline, has come full circle. It's like one of those social media trends. One day everybody's talking about it. A few days later, everyone's moved on to the next trend. Facebook's popularity, of course, lasts more than a few days. It lasted over a decade. The platform was opened to everyone in the year 2006. 4 years later, the blockbuster biopic on Zuckerberg was released. Ever since, his story has been dictated by the ups and downs of Facebook. Currently, Facebook's market cap is under $475 billion. And Zuckerberg's wealth is down to $76 billion. He has lost nearly $50 billion in the first 4 months of this year. No other billionaire in the top 20 list has come even close to suffering such a fall. You can blame this on the fall of Facebook's profits, its policies, Zuckerberg's leadership. He rebranded Facebook when the world clearly needed a change that went beyond the name. People wanted a change in the privacy policy. They needed trust, credibility, honesty, transparency, and Facebook failed to deliver. As Facebook fell from grace, so did its face, Mark Zuckerberg. That's the story. We're wrapping the show and wrapping the week with that, leaving you with Gravitas Images. Thanks very much for watching. Have a good weekend. We'll see you on Monday.
Please can I ask you?
Money, money, money. It's so scummy. It ain't just PC's world. Money, money, money. It's so scummy. It ain't just PC's world.
View from a camera mounted in one of the windows. This planned jettison will be retrograde from the direction of travel.
Of the jettisoning. Go towards the horizon.
And at 11:45 at Temiev.
It is moving.